You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Successful Screenwriter Podcast, where we discuss anything and everything screenwriting. Here we interview successful screenwriters and filmmakers to find out just what it takes to make it in the industry. Just a heads up, this episode is brought to you by my book, The Guide for Every Screenwriter, which has been listed as one of the best screenwriting books of all time by the Book Authority. If you're looking for something that reveals the secrets of screenwriting in an easy to understand and engaging way, then this is the book for you. You can find The Guide for Every Screenwriter at thesuccessfulscreenwriter.com/books. Now, on to the show. All right, welcome to the podcast. We have on such an awesome guest today. I can't even tell you how excited I am. All right, so we have on story editor WME. He has read over 60,000 screenplays. He has produced the thriller The Collector, which is actually a solid thriller, and even spawned a sequel. He's traveled the world teaching screenwriting. This is Christopher Lockhart. Thank you for being on.
Hey, how are you?
Good, thanks, man. I'm really glad we can make this work out. I'm coming up on 100 episodes of this show. We break down the craft of screenwriting. We talk about how to find success. One thing I have kind of been putting off because I've been waiting for the perfect guest is actually loglines. And that's like one of the hardest things that I find screenwriters really struggle with. And you're like a logline guru, so this is perfect.
Well, I don't know if I'm a guru, but I use them a lot in my line of work.
Yeah.
So,
So before we kind of launch into your methodology of creating a logline, can we just get I know I've given your resume here, but can we get a little bit more about your origin story and kind of what brought you into what you're doing now?
Well, I started in Hollywood 30 plus years ago. I worked as a writer. I had a writing partner, and we wrote for about a decade. And then we went our own ways. I eventually sort of serendipitously segued into the agency business, something that I had never thought about doing, something that I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
I started at ICM. I worked there for 9 years as the story consultant to Ed Lamato, who was this Uber talent agent and the vice president of the agency. And I stayed with him when we moved to the William Morris agency. He eventually passed away, and then William Morris merged with Endeavor to create the new super agency, WME, which is now the world's largest talent agency, where I am the story editor. And so my job is to look for potential creative projects for some of our A-list clientele, nice, including Denzel Washington. I've been working with Denzel Washington for 25 years.
Wow.
And so also, as you mentioned, on the side, I produce films. I have a film coming out next year that stars David Oyelowo, and I'm in pre-production on another film at the moment. And I teach. So basically everything that I do tends to revolve around the industry and scripts and often loglines.
Awesome. Very good. So tell me about, first of all, reading 60,000 scripts. I thought I've read a lot of scripts. My God, over your career, you've read more than I can't even imagine how you found time for it. So I'm assuming.
Well, it's what I get paid to do. It's my job.
Wonderful. Well, so I'm assuming that's how you've really started to really figure out what kind of logline works and what doesn't.
Yeah, because when I read a script, I have to communicate that script to all of the people in my circle who haven't read the script.
Okay.
Coworkers, agents, managers, producers, clients, actors, directors. They haven't read the script. I've read the script. So how do I communicate the script to them in the most simplistic way? Because nobody has time to listen to a 25, 30-minute synopsis of the screenplay. It's just, what's it about?
Right.
And so you give them a logline.
So boiling that down is incredibly difficult. What do you think is your secret to creating this? I mean, what is your methodology for coming up with a log line that our listeners can kind of capitalize on?
Well, look, I don't think that there's any secret. This is a utilitarian tool. It is very basic. And if somebody has written a screenplay that works,
Yeah.
then writing a log line should be easy. The reason that log lines are difficult is because most screenplays don't work.
Interesting.
And because the log line represents the screenplay, if the screenplay is broken, the log line will also be broken.
Wow.
Now, it doesn't necessarily work the other way, meaning that you can have a great log line and the screenplay can still be broken. In fact, it probably is. But ultimately, writers tend to write the screenplay and then try to figure out the log line.
Right.
As opposed to, in my opinion, doing it the other way around, which makes more sense. Now, I understand that everybody has their own creative methods, but for me, it just makes more sense to understand up front what your story is about. Look, if you're being paid to write something, if you're on assignment, unless it's a blind assignment, people want to know what it is that you're writing. So if you're working in the spec world or you've not yet broken into the professional arena, sure, you might have the luxury of just writing whatever you want without any forethought and any kind of accountability. But in the real world, there's going to be some kind of accountability, and a log line is part of that. It's part of letting somebody know up front before they're going to pay you what it is that you plan to write, what the sort of snapshot of that screenplay is going to be. So if you figure that stuff out up front, then you might have better odds of getting the screenplay right, as opposed to spending 7 or 8 months on a screenplay and then realizing, gee, my script is missing a key ingredient, which is why I can't get the log line to work.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's brilliant. I teach screenwriting as well. And in my book, I even talk about in the concept phase, when you're coming up with what you're even thinking about writing, that's the time to make the log line. It is so refreshing to hear this coming from someone like yourself, that start out with a log line early and then use that as your guidepost to keep you on track throughout the entire script. I mean, I think that's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, and it's not like it's etched in stone. So if during the writing process, you have a discovery or the script wants to go in a different direction, then you can go back and tweak the log line.
Yeah.
It's a living, breathing entity. It is not concretized. So it's a tool to be used, and but a lot of writers don't use it. And of course, you use the word concept. The reason that most scripts don't work is because they fail at that very early stage. They fail at the concept stage. Writers come up with movie ideas that are not movies, shouldn't be movies. Maybe they'd be a good novel.
Right.
Maybe a poem, but not a movie. And a great way to test if it's a movie is by creating a log line for it.
Yeah. When you're doing your log lines, do you prefer a single sentence? Do you prefer 2 sentences? I mean, is there a limitation there that you tend to want to adhere to?
I always try to do a log line in one sentence. Just because it's a log line, it's not a log line.
Oh, that's very good.
However, that doesn't mean that I have not used 2 sentences. Of course I have. But I'm also very good with creative punctuation. So sometimes I can just make something that might, under normal circumstances, be 2 sentences, but have it look like 1 sentence.
The run-on log line?
Maybe a little bit, but it's not like there's a die-hard rule, or that you're going to be drummed out of the business because you have 2 sentences. I don't believe in word count. People, well, your log line must be 25 words or less.
Right.
Listen, I probably deal more with log lines than 90% of anybody in this industry. And if I don't have any rules, then I can guarantee that there are no rules. And but ultimately, If it becomes 4 or 5 or 6 lines, now it's a short synopsis.
Right.
It's not a log
Of
line
course.
anymore.
Yeah. Well, I have to ask you this because, I always feel that a log line can really represent your level of writing. So perfecting that log line and really kind of getting it right, even if it takes you a month, it really sets up like, okay, this person can write a log line. Maybe this script is actually worth reading.
Well, yeah, I think maybe that's a little wishful thinking, and like I wouldn't judge a person's writing ability on a log line.
Okay.
Just because I've read so many screenplays with great log lines, and so.
And
like,
they didn't follow it up. Very good. Okay.
Certainly not. So I feel like I have the empirical evidence. I'm very realistic about log lines. The only thing that a log line does for me is it tells me that this screenplay has potential.
Gotcha. Very
and
good.
Nothing more than that. But when you have 50 scripts that you have to read in a weekend,
Oof.
and you're going to go through the pile, and maybe there's some log lines attached to those scripts because they've already been vetted. And you're looking at log lines and you say, this one sounds interesting. This one doesn't sound interesting. This one doesn't sound interesting. And it's very possible that the ones that don't sound interesting are great screenplays. And the log lines that do sound interesting are bad screenplays. I'm aware of all of this because I've seen it all happen. But ultimately, the way the business works is that it is impossible to read every single script that comes over the transom. It is impossible. Right. There are too many scripts. And so the only way that busy executives or agents or managers can really decide what they're going to read is based on a log line.
Yeah.
Is this something that I want to invest 2 hours of my time with? And it is a shot in the dark. It's no different than reading a blurb for a product on Amazon. I mean, it sounds great. You don't know for a fact that product is going to be amazing, but the blurb sounds pretty good.
Right.
So you'll take a chance with it.
So what kind of log line is grabbing you? What is in that log line that you go, okay, this is interesting?
Well, it's hard to say because it's really an individual thing, but
Gotcha.
I can tell you that really in regards to the basics of a log line,
sure,
these are the things that I need to see.
Okay.
I need to know who is the protagonist. I need to know what it is that the protagonist wants. And I need to know what stands in the protagonist's way.
Okay, very good.
Those are just 3 very simple elements. And as a result, a log line should be really easy because you should be able to say, okay, who's my protagonist? Yeah. What does my protagonist want? And what stands in my protagonist's way? Yeah. So like if I were the writer of Jaws, I might say, okay, who's my protagonist? Mm-hmm. Well, it's the sheriff. What is it that the sheriff wants? Well, there's a man-eating shark in town. And it's the height of tourist season, and he wants to kill that shark. And what stands in his way? Well, there's a shark that stands in his way. There's the Chamber of Commerce that stands in his way. And a mayor. These elements can be put into the log line, and that's it. Yes. I love it. And it's simple. And if you can't answer that, then you're absolutely right. Your script is broken somewhere. You need to go back and look at it. Absolutely. And the majority of the time when I'm talking to new writers, the broken element is that second question. What is it that the protagonist wants? Because most of the time, what the protagonist wants in the script of a new writer is something that is vague, something that is novelistic, something that is not cinematic, something that cannot sustain a 120-page screenplay, even a 90-page screenplay. That tends to be the biggest missing factor. I would say, I'll go on a limb, I'll say 8 out of 10 log lines from new writers will be missing that.
Yeah.
They might think they have it because it's usually something like, oh, the character is looking for peace. But what does that mean? That's
It's
poetry.
esoteric. Yeah.
It's not drama, right? In drama, you find the metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
You find a cinematized metaphor that you can explore that with through conflict.
I love it. I mean, it's essentially you're not sure who your character is, and this character isn't developed enough. You haven't finished working on them. You need to go back and really find out what's motivating them, what their inner want versus need is, and really build that out to figure out that aspect of the logline that's missing. It's totally true.
Right. Because it's unlike a novel. In a screenplay, your character is defined not by the idiosyncrasies per se, like whether or not she drinks Coke from a can or a bottle, which people love. And that certainly helps to create, the aura of a character. But ultimately, in drama, a character is defined by the choices she makes in her attempt to get what it is that she wants.
Right.
So again, it's those choices that the character makes. So if the character doesn't have a want, doesn't have a goal, let's define the word want as a goal. If the character doesn't have a goal, then there's nothing for the character to pursue. And as a result, the character can't make choices in that pursuit. And so then you don't have a dramatic character. That's how characters defined in drama.
Yeah.
And this is why most screenplays don't work.
You're just dropping like golden nuggets here, man. It's absolutely brilliant. And I really appreciate it. I hope everybody listening to this, it really gets it. Now, there's a difference between, I think at least, writing a log line for a feature versus a log line for a television. What I find is that in television, it's the why that stops them is a little bit of an issue if you're having like a longer term overarching macro arc. But I want to get your impression and your opinion on the differences between a log line of a feature versus the log line of television.
Well, I don't think that there is any difference, with the exception that in TV, if you're pitching, let's say, a series, you might have two log lines, one that represents the series and one that represents the pilot.
Okay, very
and
good.
And perhaps a log line for each subsequent episode that perhaps you have written, or that at least you have some inkling of. But log lines are log lines.
Yeah.
So it's always, who is the protagonist? What does the protagonist want? And what stands in the protagonist's way? So in a series, it's more, if you are going to create a log line for the series itself,
right,
that would be much more of a macro look at the story. And then if you were to create a log line for the pilot, that would be more micro.
Perfect.
Sometimes the pilot sets up the series, and then other times we're just dropped into the middle of the series. And right. So, but yeah, to me, the mechanics of writing a log line do not change.
Christopher, is there any tips you have for writers that are going to be out there making log lines that I haven't asked you yet that you can dive in more on?
Well, I would just say that really think about what it is that you're going to write. Think about the concept. Ask yourself, not only do I want to spend the next 6 or 8 months with this, but are there going to be people who want to invest $5 million in this? Are audiences going to want to risk COVID at a movie theater for this? Screenplays is a tough business because while it's an art form, like all of cinema, it is an art form for the masses.
Right.
It's not like poetry where it's more personal.
Yeah.
you are writing for a big audience. Even if it's a small film, you're still writing for a fairly big audience. And so coming up with that concept first and foremost, and really thinking about it. What are the stakes? Why do we care? Just thinking that through, ruminating on that. Like once you sort of are engaged by the concept, also asking yourself, what makes this different? So if you're coming up with the 80 millionth version of Taken, or John Wick, or Harry Potter, what makes your take different? What's the spin on it? And often when I ask writers that, and they answer the question and they say, well, my unique take is, and I'm like, yeah, that's not unique at all.
Right.
So it's also about knowing what's out there, seeing movies. A lot of people live in bubbles that write screenplays, I fear. So if you
gotta be a bit of a cinephile, don't you?
Well, there's nothing I hate more than when I'm in a meeting with somebody who doesn't appreciate the business in which they are trying to gain entry. I'm sort of turned off by people that don't know the history of the business that they're trying to get into. Because to me, it just feels like, okay, this isn't a person, this is a one-off.
Gotcha.
This is somebody who just wants to sort of sell a script and isn't doing it because they love it. Because the truth is that if you don't love this, then you're not going to make it.
Right.
Because you have to love it, because it's such a brutal business. You absolutely have to love it, because it's the love that allows you to endure the rejection, that you have to, regardless of how many times you get kicked in the face, you have to continually go out and ask for more. So yeah, I think that they should be reading Deadline Hollywood. They should be reading The Hollywood Reporter and Variety and IndieWire.
Yeah,
and just
the trades.
knowing what's going on out there. I think that they should be doing all of this before they write Loglines, before they even start to write screenplays. Know a little bit about the business, because oddly enough, you may have seen a million movies. That doesn't mean that you're going to write a good screenplay.
Yeah,
and
true.
by the way, you can write a screenplay. You can spend 3 years writing a screenplay. And as my son would say, it could be trash.
That's still true. My son says that too. So you sparked something in me. I just want to follow up with you real quick. So you talked about what makes your script unique and how it's different from like the millions Taken. Is that uniqueness something that you want to be revealed in the logline?
Well, it should be revealed in the logline, because it should be part of the concept.
Yeah.
So it should be there.
Absolutely.
I always tell writers that basically your logline encapsulates the first act of your screenplay.
Okay.
And the first act reveals all of that information that I asked for earlier. Who's the protagonist?
Yep.
What does the protagonist want? What stands in the protagonist's way? That's all set up in the first act. And any sort of hook that you have, any sort of original element, should most certainly be in the first act. And if it's in the first act, it should most certainly be in the logline. Make
sure you include that hook then. I feel like we already answered this, but I'm gonna throw it out there anyway. Is there anything I didn't ask you that I should have?
Probably a million things, but
anything leaping out?
Nothing leaps out at me.
Okay. All right. So where can people find you?
I have a Facebook group.
Okay.
Actually, it's called The Inside Pitch. And you just have to search The Inside Pitch. It is a screenwriting / filmmaking group. And we trade log lines, and we have classes. We interviewed Christopher McQuarrie and
awesome.
Some really great people. We stream those live on the page. We did a logline workshop. Right now, we're in the middle of our annual logline pitch contest.
That's cool.
And everything's free.
That's lovely.
So you can come look us up there.
Yeah, I will add that link to the show notes so that anybody listening can easily click on that and be part of the group.
And tell us that you heard about the group here.
Oh, perfect. The Successful Screenwriter Podcast. Christopher, thank you so much for doing this. It's been such a real pleasure.
Thank you, Geoffrey.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share in your social media where you can tag us at The Successful Screenwriter.